Hello, this is Dr. Lee Hildebrand on my YouTube channel, Dr. Lee Hildebrand. I am a psychologist, executive coach, podcaster, YouTuber, and I run a mental health clinic in Mequon. And for my YouTube channel today, I would like to do a video focused on facing shame and your accusers. Now, what prompted this is in talking with various clients, it seems that whether it be clients or friends or family members, that there are experiences in our lives where we have accusers. In other words, either people or memories or things of that nature that literally point their, sometimes literally it's another person, that points their finger at us and says, you're bad, you're wrong, it's all your fault. How could you do that? How could you be so stupid? There's many messages that can go with and from these accusers. So at the outset of this, I want to talk about how we handle mentally our own internal accusers and then expand from that. Now, for many of us in situations, as we were growing up, some of our most predominant influences happen when we're children. As part of that, we sometimes find ourselves in environments, either with parental figures or other figures, who are really negative toward us at times, can give us some very difficult messages. Sometimes this can be a family member, a direct parent, and sometimes they can be really neglectful and downright abusive. They may give us messages like, you're so selfish, or you're not going to amount to anything, or you're stupid, or how could you be so stupid, or shame on you, and many other types of messages. In addition to that, I've experienced people that have been bullied when they were growing up, that there was some aspect of themselves that was criticized by other children in situations. And today, obviously, we have situations with social media where others can be really quite critical and quite negative about our person and who we are. So what happens when we're developing is that when we receive these kinds of negative messages, we can sometimes really internalize them as we're developing. We internalize them in our brains and our minds, and that childlike part of us that just wants everything to be okay, that wants to be loved, that wants the world around us to be safe, feels threatened. And sometimes children start to believe messages about them that are not accurate. Messages like, you're stupid, or how could you do this? And that internalization can take the form of what's called shame. And shame is basically a viewpoint that you're not enough, that you're defective, that there's some fundamental aspect about who you are that is unworthy. Now, in contrast to guilt, guilt is feeling appropriate remorse and conviction about something that we've done wrong in a situation, that we've done morally wrong, or that we've done hurtful to another person. And guilt is different than shame. In terms of guilt, the way that we deal with guilt is we acknowledge what we have done or something we've said that was hurtful, and we hopefully make amends to the other person. In other words, we seek the other person out and we acknowledge our wrong, and then we can be free of that. Shame, on the other hand, is a more pervasive sense that I, as a human being, I am defective. And this internalization of this can really start to influence, sometimes unbeknownst to us, how we think in developing relationships and then in adult relationships for those of us that are in adulthood. Now, it's really important to understand how shame can influence you, because in situations we can experience data or feedback from somebody else, including a close significant other or a spouse or a friend. They may say something that might be constructive criticism or something in which they're trying to help us out. And a lot of times this, I'll call it the shame rubric, the means in which we interpret information can be influenced through the shame rubric, all information going through that rubric. And it can lead us to concluding that they're saying something very different. For instance, if someone's spouse says, did you take the trash out this morning? And let's say that you didn't. You might have internalized messages if you have a shame rubric that say, yeah, you forgot the trash again, you stupid idiot. How could you be so dumb? You're not contributing anything and you're not worthwhile. So we take a very simple message that might be in our external environment and we multiply it into this negative, pervasive message that proves to us in sort of that court in our mind, the gavel comes down and the conclusion is, yes, the narrative that I have about myself that I'm not enough is being corroborated. It's being proven true in this situation. And so we kind of artificially play this drama out in our minds, concluding time and time again with the gavel coming down that we have more evidence that maybe we're not enough, that we're not enough, that we are defective, that we're not worthwhile, and that nobody's really going to love us. Now, many people that experience this, the cognitive part of them, the frontal cortex part of their brain, if you asked them directly, they wouldn't say, yeah, I'm a piece of junk and I'm not worthwhile enough. They wouldn't necessarily say that offhand. So intellectually, they can understand that that's not the case. But on more the lower brain and at the heart level, they feel these things. These are messages that kind of run like a subtle river beneath the moat that carry consistent negativity with them. So the first step in regard to dealing with this is to recognize the accusers in our mind and the historical accusers that have sought to undermine us due to their own insecurities, their immaturities, their lack of education, their lack of awareness, that have sought to undermine, shame, minimize us, dismiss us, and many other things. Sometimes they've done it intentionally, and sometimes people do it unintentionally. So to be able to recognize the sources of some of that and start to combat that and to help the child within us, if you will, to gain more reassurance that those messages from the past are not true and that they weren't true, and that we need to stop living according to those messages and the accusers that are contained in them. I'll never forget an example of this. For me, I was probably in late grade school, and I was at a babysitter and going to visit my little girlfriend a house or two away. And the way I would get her attention is I took a little pebble, and she'd be in her room or whatnot. It'd be the afternoon. I'd maybe want to talk to her, see if she could come out and play, is I would throw a tiny little pebble at the window and it would just get her attention. She'd come out. Well, one of these times I threw a pebble at the window and it actually cracked the window. And I was so scared and I ran 2 yards over to the house where I was getting babysat at. And all of a sudden, I don't know, 3-4 minutes later, I hear, "Lee Hildebrand, you're in trouble." And she might have said it a couple times. And of course, being a young kid, I was terrified. Oh my goodness, what's going to happen? I'm going to be in big trouble. So I submit to you that when you've had a shame background, situations like that take on this tremendous magnitude. When we do something that's a mistake or a poor judgment or something of that nature, we take it to the extreme degree. And so I like to liken it to adult shame situations, almost somebody, when it's a legit thing that occurred that was a mistake or an accident, like this megaphone in our mind saying our name and then basically saying, "You're not enough. You're in trouble. You should be ashamed." And all of these kinds of negative messages. So in understanding where these come from and who our traditional accusers are, we can start, and hopefully with the help of a safe and trusted other person, like a counselor or a psychologist, a life coach, can always help with this, that have experience in regard to dismantling these internalized shame messages so that we can be free and that we can have a more accurate view of ourselves. What can come out of that is a next step, which would be starting to set boundaries with other people, because in our current life, whether we have internalized shame or not, there are going to be situations and there are going to be people. Sometimes it might be a significant other, it might be a coworker, it might be just somebody out in civilization that we run into, that we are going to have accusers that are coming to attack us, sometimes literally physically. And so it's important that we can set boundaries with those that are stepping out of line and trying to do this. And that those boundaries are basically what separates us from that other person. It's what we're going to allow and what we're not going to allow in regard to the way other people treat us. That's a very important skill to learn. And another aspect of this is having an openness when we encounter situations where people have constructive feedback or otherwise for us. We do a quick analysis and we leave shame out of the mix and say, hey, is there anything here that I can take away that's positive that I can learn from? Is there a different way that I can do certain things? Are there adjustments that I can make? And then secondly, to forget the rest. Everybody has an opinion. Opinions are a dime a dozen. And there are plenty of people that will try to tell you an opinion about what they think about you in regard to what you're doing or what you're not doing, that are happy to give you an opinion. And some of them not delicately at all, or with any kind of sensitivity, and at times downright abusive. So we need to learn to stand up to our accusers. We take what we can from those that are trying to offer us legitimate feedback, forget the rest, and then those that are just trying to be bullies or mean-spirited or whatnot, we need to take a stand. We need to take a stand and resist our accusers. We do this in terms of our minds, as I described before, because sometimes when present accusers come out, historical shame-based accusers in our minds from our history will jump in and magnify the chorus of you are wrong, you're not enough, etc., etc. So we need to be able to stop the shame messages, to identify them, say, oh, that's one of those historical accusers who, by the way, was, let's say they called you selfish. You're so selfish when you're a child because you actually had needs. Well, you're able to take the step back and go, holy cow, you talk about projection. In other words, that's one of the most selfish people I've ever known, sitting there calling me selfish, as an example. So you resist and you rightfully put those accusers from the past back in perspective in the place. And with your present accusers, you set boundaries and you resist being bullied. You resist being pushed around. You resist being attacked. And this is where we need to be appropriately assertive and stand up for what's right. For most bullies, whether they're a verbal bully, sometimes a physical bully, I don't have specific expertise in that. There's others that could speak more definitively in terms of martial arts or certain defenses from an actual physical attack. I'm not going to address that today. But I will say, when it's a verbal attack or there's certain aggression, a lot of times a bully just needs a check. Sometimes it can be a very short statement that says enough, or stops the conversation, or takes a timeout, or leaves the situation. If a bully has an audience, if they have you as an audience continuing to listen to their bullying, they will continue to bully. They'll continue to plow forward and bully you. But if you can get a stopgap, if you can get a check, I'm kind of representing it physically, and sometimes physically that can stop a bully as well. Then a lot of times they will kind of stop in their tracks a little bit and be caught off guard and maybe stop and cease and desist. So my hope is with this video today that I've helped you give some consideration about how you can approach those accusers in your life. And you may have even a literal accuser that's occurring in your life. It might be in a business sense or a legal sense or some other kind of context. And it's important that you're able to discern and eliminate the past influences of shame and distorted viewpoints of you that you've carried around, and then deal with the present accusers in appropriate ways. And a lot of times that's going to involve you needing to feel like you're enough yourself, that you are good enough, that you are very valuable. You're a child of God. There's inherent value in who you are in so many ways, that you're able to stand in that, and that you're able to assert boundaries in terms of how you are treated. It's my sincere hope that our dialogue today has been helpful for you in any circumstance that you're facing, both with your own internalized shame or with an accuser in the present in your life. Please feel free to share this with anybody that you think this would benefit. I really appreciate you tuning in, and I wish you well in regard to experiencing freedom from your internalized accusers and the boldness and the courage to stand firm to face your present accusers in your life. Wishing you well, and thanks again for tuning in.